After e4, e6, d4, d5, knight to c3, we're playing against the French defense. In this video, we're going to go through something we haven't seen at all. So, well, we're playing the Rubinstein, right? Black is playing the Rubinstein, taking this pawn, knight takes back. And now, in earlier videos, we played knight to d7, which is the main line, or another idea, bishop d7 and bishop c6. In this video, we're going to go through the knight f6 straight away. This is obviously one of the most popular moves, and we have to know what to do against it. So here we take the knight immediately. There's two ways to take back. One of them is with the pawn, the other one with the queen. So queen takes, let's look at this first of all. Knight f3 now. And now the black player only has one move that saves the game, because h6 now is the only move that allows the black player to continue this game. Any other move loses immediately. Let's make an example. Bishop to d6, developing, right? Looks like a completely normal move. Bishop to g5, attacks the queen. Queen has to move. There's nowhere really to go. e5 is controlled by the knight, d4 by the knight. The bishop is protected by the knight. f4 is protected by the bishop. So the only square will be queen to g6. And now you play bishop to d3. And the queen is trapped, unless the queen will have to go to h5. So she only has one option. Or you might ask, okay, what about f5? Okay, let's see. If the queen goes to h5, you play h3. The idea is to play g4 and trap the queen. The queen will have literally nowhere to go. Okay, so let's see. If black plays, I don't know, f6, right? It comes with an attack on the bishop. It also allows the queen an escape. We're not going to trap the queen, but the game is completely compromised. That's why I said before the h6 is the only move that saves the game. So now white goes on with bishop to d2, saving the bishop. And after castle, but either way, we're going to play the usual moves. Now the usual moves will be queen e2. So regardless of even black doesn't castle and plays something else, bishop, knight, or whatever, you're going to play queen e2. And now, let's say rook e8, queen to e4. The idea here is to play g4, getting the queen away from this file. So that means after g4, the queen can't go anywhere here, can go up either, or h6 because of our bishop. So the queen will have to go away, and then we can infiltrate in h7. Even if instead the queen goes here to g6, you are attacking the square multiple times anyway. So you're attacking it twice and you're winning a pawn. It's a crucial pawn. It's completely winning endgame. So obviously the idea is g4. So let's make an example. Black plays e5 to allow the bishop maybe to play f5, or simply to allow the bishop to develop, or try to trade with this pawn, because the rook will deliver an attack on the queen, and the queen will be pinned. So if pawn takes pawn, then black is completely winning here, since the queen is pinned and the rook is defended. Okay, g4 comes now. And now taking the pawn doesn't work anymore, because after taking this queen for free, rook taking now queen, but then we take back with upper rook. So after g4, our opponent will have to move the queen. Queen to g6, only move that stays alive. Queen takes, pawn takes, bishop takes pawn with upper pawn. Now pawn takes in d4 with a discovered attack is not possible, because the bishop is attacking the rook. So now the rook will have to move. Okay, rook e7. Keeping the attack, threatening to take this pawn, and maybe making a check, at least get some initiative. But white just castles. Position is rightfully evaluated, +2. So it's very solid advantage. Now taking the pawn is just detrimental, even more for black, because then we can take back with the knight, improving the position of our knight. Planning maybe knight to f5, while the knight will be sitting very happily. A move like e4 attacking the knight doesn't work. You just play knight h4, threatening to reach the square again. Position completely winning here. So back in this position where we play queen e4, what if instead of e5 our opponent plays knight to c6, developing, right? Just to make an example. Okay, castle long, as we said. You might wonder, then why not g4 right now? Because it doesn't even make a difference. The computer doesn't even care at this point. Let's make an example. You can just play g4 either way. So if black plays knight to b4, threatening to take this incredible bishop, then you just take the knight. Bishop takes back, and now g4 comes. And you're achieving roughly the same thing. So it's an excellent position. Let's say if queen goes through e7 in this position, what to do? Okay, here's what you're threatening. Queen check, king takes. You might wonder, even before, well, the same thing here. You just play bishop here. There's a skewer. You don't have a mate. Queen h8 doesn't lead to mate, but bishop g6 wins material. And now in this position after g4, what if the queen goes to h6? We don't have that dark square bishop anymore. This comes with check. What are you going to do now? Attack more, g5. And now we're achieving the same thing. We're going to h7 until unless our opponent takes in g5. But then you play h4. And now you're threatening to take this pawn. It's going to be game over because you're going to have a discovered attack on the queen, an extra attacker on the square h7, and obviously pushing g4 with a discovered check doesn't work because, you know, the knight's under attack. But if you move the knight to g7, you do have triple attack on this square. And then you can play king b1 anytime you want. But black's pawn structure and everything is completely damaged. If instead you might ask, okay, what if black takes the pawn with the check? Okay, we've given up 2 pawns here, but that's fine. We move, and now we're threatening rook h4 and then piling up the attack on h7. It's a disaster, right? Completely winning position. So what if black plays the only attempt of trying to stay alive? g5. Or you might say, okay, what about g6 and then maybe queen g7? None of that works, right? Because rook takes and then you can just put the other rook in h1 and you're going to have double attack on h7. So let's look at g5, which controls this pawn even more and seems like it's solid enough to survive. Rook d to g1 comes now threatening this. So no, that doesn't work. Bishop to e7, providing more defense over g5. Okay, then rook takes in h4 and the position is falling apart. So how about we make a recap now and we understand this better and better. So knight c3, we're looking at the Rubinstein take, and now the very early knight f6. Okay, take, and we're looking at the variation with queen takes in f6. Then later we're going to look at g takes f6. Okay, so here you play knight f3, and after black's playing any move, the game is compromised. White plays bishop g5, only move queen g6, bishop d3, only move... Okay, now we're going to also look at f5, but that's really stupid, but you'll see. Queen to h5 is the only move, and now h3, threatening g4, winning the game. Okay, so we're looking at f6, attacking the bishop and giving an escape to the black queen. Okay, bishop to d2. Castle, queen e2. Rook e8, queen e4. You might ask, what about this move, f5? Isn't it like an obvious move that you might want to play? Yes, this move might do the job of removing all the, like it stops the queen and bishop from attacking the square. It stops this move g4, but it's a positional weakness, and now there's a concession that black gave us. Now you just play queen back to e2, and what you've done basically is you have provoked this ugly pawn structure, and position is evaluated like plus 150 or something, which means that of course you're not going to win the game immediately, but it's now going bad for our opponent. First of all, let's point out that this bishop can't play it light square bishop. Secondly, let's see now here our opponent cannot really push the pawn in f4 because then you will be able to go back to e4 unbothered. So let's look at this developing move. Knight to c6. Okay, long castle. We were going to do this no matter what. Bishop to d7, developing. You might say, okay, this is going to be a completely normal game. So now what's happening is that white can play g4 anyway, and we're giving up the pawn. And obviously, if black takes, when you take back, there's going to be a lot of bad stuff happening to our opponent. Because look, the bishop's attacking h7. This bishop attacking this diagonal. This rook's attacking h7. This rook is coming to g1 and attacking everything near the opponent king. So instead of looking at this line where you're completely winning very easily, what if black plays queen to f7, the more solid variation that there is? The idea now is to play bishop to c4, and we are going to take this pawn here to open the files for the rooks to attack this king. So what if black closes or tries to keep the file closed with f4? Okay, you play h4. And since you are not able to open these files through swaps, because our opponent cleverly decided not to swap anything, otherwise he would have been over very quickly, what you're going to do is just throw the pawns until they swap with these pawns, and that should be it. The bishop pair that we have is particularly well placed, and the rooks is all good. Our king is much safer than our opponent kings. So here now, what if our opponent plays queen e7, getting out of this very strong bishop attack, maybe playing king h8, try to continue a normal game. Okay, you play queen e4. The queen is once again very well placed, and now for black to be able to play e5 and open this everything and be able to be active, black will have to play king h8 because the pawn in e6 is pinned. this bishop in c4 cannot be removed by the knight or something because the bishop's attacking a5. So king h8, now knight to g5 comes, and now we're threatening mate. Okay, g6 to stop the mate from happening. Now the queen is defending h7, and now you cannot play h5. This would be the most intuitive move because careful, you lose this knight, and I don't think what you have is enough to win this game. Although I think the position is probably still winning. The most accurate move here is bishop to c3, threatening d5, deadly move. So d5 wins the game immediately. Although you might say, okay, what if after... Okay, well, okay, first of all, e5 here by black doesn't work because knight f7 check. And the main problem is that now the king will have to move, and you have discovered checks. If king goes to a light square, you can win free material. If king goes to g7, then first you take the pawn here. And then after all the swap, take, rook will be taking the bishop for free in d7. I'm sure you can see that. So in this position, what about instead of e5, what if h6 attacking our knight? Do we have anything? Okay, d5, as we said, was the killer move. Although you might argue, okay, what if e5? Doesn't that block everything? Now we still have a knight under attack. We might have to go to e6 with the knight. But the best move now here is pawn takes in c6. This comes with an attack on another piece. So if our opponent takes us, remember, you can take back, comes with a check. It's a deadly move. We also have an attack on this bishop. Okay, so what if black takes back with the bishop, with an attack on the queen, with the skewer on the rook, whilst there's an attack on this knight? Obviously, you got queen g6, and now taking the rook here will be just too late, because then queen to h6 will be checkmate to follow. Okay, what about queen to g7? Stopping all of that from happening. Knight f7 check. And we should be winning the queen. Unless our opponent tries to play cool and play king to g8. But then you have a discovered check with the knight. You can take the pawn in h6. Although the most accurate move is knight to e5. Check by the bishop. And when the king moves, play queen to f5 check. And after all the captures here, you can maybe even take, say king e7. You can even take the bishop and then bring the rooks. It's up to you. You're completely winning this one. If instead of f8 the king had gone to h8, you play knight f7 check again. Queen takes, bishop takes, and then queen h6 is unstoppable checkmate. Or you also have queen g6, queen g7 checkmate with the support of the bishop. Okay, so let's go from the start and see something related. Take, the early knight f6, take. So knight f3, and after bishop to d6, you attack the queen immediately, and after queen to g6, bishop to d3. Queen to h5 is not the only move. The other move is f5, but this is again just wrong, right? The game is already compromised. So you play queen to e2, and it's it's some sort of transposition into what we've seen before. It's very similar patterns, the same structure. Our opponent is unable to really castle anywhere that makes sense. So anyway, black now can play h6, and now just simply bishop to d2. Let's not go through queen to g2, because after rook to g1, the rook is defended by the knight. The queen will have to move again. You go access to g7. It's terrible for black. So obviously this is a stupid pawn to take. Let's go on through development. And let's see a pattern we haven't seen. Knight to c6. Well, something that needs to be mentioned is how bishop to c4 is the best move now, and it puts a lot of pressure on this square. And after bishop to d7 and long castle, you're gonna have a lot of pressure over e6, and that pressure is there to stay. And this is inevitable, because if now it's our move. Black just play bishop d7 in order to try and castle alongside and get out of trouble, but you can just play d5 already, and you are winning a crucial pawn. This bishop cannot be removed from this square c4, because the bishop is attacking the dark diagonal and the knight can't attack the bishop. d5 now ultimates the attack on that pawn and should be already game over. e5 cannot be played because we got an attack on the bishop. Knight e5 cannot be played because we got two attackers. So do you see how it was just very stupid of our opponent to play this defense in the first place. So now obviously you can say, this is things going wrong and our opponent not seeing stuff. Well, the thing is, it's not like your opponent not seeing stuff, but rather your opponent not being able to do stuff, because if you were to try, let's say, for example, you want your opponent to develop. I mean, you want to believe that your opponent wants to develop. So they have to play this move, but that loses to d5. What if they don't play that move and play something else? Then what? There's nothing to play unless our opponent wants to delay castling, or unless he wants to castle this side. But if he castles this side, we're gonna still have double attack on this pawn, and we're gonna carry on with the same advantage as before. When we castle alongside, we go h3, g4, open the files, and this king in this file is very weak because we're gonna castle long, and the opponent queen has lost many tempos, and we're gonna play h3, g4. Let's make now one more mention to the early queen d8 move, which is stupid. It doesn't deserve to be seen, but let's quickly look at it. Knight takes, queen takes, and now knight f3. Many players at any level, actually, even at over 2000 level, they often play this move, queen d8, just to get out of that bishop g5 idea, because if we play bishop g5 now, black can just play anything. So let's go on with bishop to d3. This is black giving away 2 tempos just to preserve the bishop pair. But anyway, bishop to e7 develop, queen e2, and now a move like castle looks like completely normal, but look, our opponent has wasted crucial tempos that allow our position to be much better. h4 comes now. You know why this is happening. Always play h4 in this position. Why? Because you've got, you know, that Greek gift idea, which you don't have. If our opponent had picked bishop d6 instead of bishop d7, you know, you will have this bishop check, king takes, knight g5 check, king moves, and then queen to h5 checkmate, right? You watch my videos. If you watch my videos, you're not a beginner. You know exactly what a Greek gift is. So h4 is the type of move you're going to play when you want to make the Greek gift, but there's an extra attacker on the dark squares. So if there's a bishop here on e7, you can't play knight g5 because it just gets taken. So what you do is play h4 supporting the knight. Now the knight can go to h5, and it can already be taken because you can take back, the rook becomes a monster on that file. So let's make an example, c5, right, just to make a random move. Bishop h7 is already possible, okay? And now if our opponent moves the king, knight g5 comes anyway, queen h5 comes anyway, checkmate soon. If our opponent takes the bishop instead, knight check. And now king to g6, you might wonder, this is bad because you just push the pawn. Check. And, you know, the king going to f6, the game is becoming a joke. You go queen f3. If the king goes back here to h6, you move the knight, it's checked by the bishop, you win the queen, and we're having red wine tonight. No, I'm kidding, I hate wine. I prefer vodka. So in this position, you may say, okay, what if instead of castling black, just play knight to d7, and then potentially play knight f6, where the knight belongs, protecting h7, and playing a normal move, and then castling would be absolutely safer. White goes on with bishop e3, and now this is, you know, after knight f6, this is going to be some sort of transposition from something we've seen before. However, you know, we castle long, and after castling, black is now much safer, but white goes on with g4. The crucial tempos that the queen wasted by going to f6 and then back to d8 is the reason why we are able to push these pawns here without repercussion. We've chosen to castle alongside g4, g5, h4, h5, and so on. You should be able to play a very good game. This pawn should not be taken, just to mention. Oh, by the way, h6 here doesn't do anything because g5 comes anyway, right? All that matters is that you open the files for the rooks, right? So let's see. Last mention, knight taking here is bad. It comes with an attack on the bishop. You have to first save the bishop. And now, after our opponent develops, you know, our file are open, so that's fine. First save the bishop. Obviously, a move like b6 to develop the bishop from this very good diagonal doesn't work because queen here comes with an attack on the rook, the knight, and the pawn. Well, I mean, the mate. So the only move here will be f5 to protect the knight and protect the mate, but you will still win the rook with no repercussion. So that move is obviously stupid, so b6 can't happen. If our opponent goes back to f6, how do we properly carry out this attack? We've lost the pawn, but we've opened the file. Rook h to g1. The next move is this one, bishop h6, to protect the rook. Obviously, black can't push the pawn because then you will win the exchange. So black goes rook e8, but now rook to g7. Boom! It's an incredible move. Already going for it. We don't care about the rook being lost because our development is just fantastic. So king takes, and now our next move is obviously rook to g1, and now we're attacking the entire file. Our opponent desperately goes to h8 and potentially plays rook g8 and wins the game because we're down a rook. So what to do now? Knight to e5, meaning that rook g8 is not possible because knight f7 is mate. This is now forcing our opponent to play rook to f8 from where the rook will be defending this pawn. How do you capitalize on these games? Because sometimes I did have these type of games, and I still, sometimes also, especially if it's blitz, sometimes you just don't find the win. So let's make sure to do a very smart thing, guys. Never play blitz, never do drags, never play d4, never get the news from the same source of information, never put pineapple on pizza, and most importantly, never leave the screen when you're losing a game on chess.com. Just resign. Anyway, I completely forgot what I was talking about. Oh yeah, bishop h6 attacks the rook. And, you can say black will be happy to lose the exchange. But that's not just the point. The point is you're also threatening bishop g7 check, king moves, and then bishop takes knight. And that's going to be the end of the game. So this is not just an attack on the exchange. Considering that we gave a rook, our opponent will be happy to give it up. And if he moves the rook, we go into f7. There's nothing here that actually works. Knight h5 stops the bishop from going to g7. We can obviously take it with the queen, and the bishop and the mate threat remains. This leads us to the last recap, and now we're gonna go through the most important move, right? So take, and now knight f6 early on, take, knight f3, and now h6. This is very important, and the player that plays this variation should know it and will know it. Although I've beaten players of every level because they didn't know this. So watch out. Now you've seen this video, make sure you rewatch it, possibly 300,000 times, just to support the channel. Come on, be nice. White goes on with bishop to d3 now, and now black plays c5. So this is the obvious move here. The best thing to do is these are all main lines, main moves. The c pawn wants to take the d pawn, and if we take, black gets to develop the bishop in a very good square. Before we do that, let's quickly mention this one. Bishop to d6 immediately. This is also a very good move. But this is now, after c3, it leads to one of the positions that we've seen before many times. But it's not exactly the same, but it's very similar. So it's the usual thing, if you've been watching this Rubinstein saga, it's the usual things. That's how it works. This strong chain of pawns. The knight goes to e5. The queen can go to e2, e4. It's very well placed. What you need to understand is, in this particular occasion, the difference is that the black player has a queen in f6. Therefore, it will take 3 moves for black to have a knight in f6, which gives us enough time to start a very strong attack. The knight will have to go to d7, the queen will have to move, the knight will have to go to f6. It's stupid. Let's make an example. Castle. The black player just castled, and now we castle. And now, if black develops the knight this side, black will not have a knight in f6. We play bishop to c2. You know what the plan is. Because our opponent doesn't have a knight in f6, you can play bishop c2, queen d3, bam, h7 mate. So b6, thematic move, rook e1, bishop to b7, developing on a very good square, queen to d3, going for the cheeky mate. Queen to g6 is just better for white if you trade. Queen takes, pawn takes, bishop takes back. The rook also has an attack on e6. It's literally up to you which one you want to take. There's nothing to worry here. There's no compensation for black whatsoever. So in this position, what if black plays? Well, obviously g6 doesn't work because bishop takes h6. Wins the pawn, makes the king weaker. You're winning this. What if black plays rook f to e8 instead? We don't have a mate, but still, we have queen h7 check, king moves, bishop to d2 develops. And that's it. We're going to leave it there. Okay, let's go on a few moves, actually, to understand what's going on. King e7 with the idea of going away, shelter, especially maybe king d7, and then play the rooks here in h8. And, then the other rook in g8, and then push the g-pawn and so on. This looks really good for black, actually. But you just played d5, so we're stopping that from happening. And now there's an attack on the knight, just like there's an attack on this pawn. So king to d7 is just not possible now. The knight will have to move. Then we can take this pawn. Black will have to take with the pawn. And it's getting amazing for us. So obviously, let's look at this move. Knight to e5. Okay, take the knight. Bishop takes back. Only way to take back because we have a rook attack in there. f4 comes now. And this comes with an attack on the bishop. So this cannot be taken. If bishop takes, then you just take the bishop. You're up a piece. If queen takes back, you take this pawn. No coming back from this horrible situation. Position evaluated +5. You're threatening to take this pawn with discover check. You got queen g7. You got the rook coming to d1. You got the bishop as well. Everybody is playing this game. So back in this position, after queen h7, king f8, we played bishop to d2. Obviously, we mentioned that king e7 is just too late to play because d5 comes with an immediate threat and it's just too strong. And even after the move f4 before bishop takes... what if bishop doesn't take, the bishop goes back? You can still play f5 and really mess up with these pawns. So let's make an example. Let's say king e7, right? Trying to find a shelter. d5, knight goes to e5. Take, f4. If the bishop moves away... Here, well, f5 isn't the most accurate. The most accurate is pawn takes in d6 here. Fantastic position. Pawn takes back. Bishop a4 is the best move. Stops our opponent from going anywhere. And if our opponent plays king to d8, the rooks are not connected, so they're kind of weak. Now black can play c6, and black is indeed out of trouble, but now it's just a better game for white to play. c6 comes now. Now our opponent can just play king all the way to c7, but look, white now play bishop to e3, placing the bishop in an ideal square. Remember, this pawn can never be taken because take, and then queen g7 check. So let's look at this now. King to d7, rook a to d1, and now a move like rook to h8, attacking the queen, is just really bad. You've got queen e4. You're gonna have a lot of attack over this bishop. You're winning easily. What if instead of that move, instead of king d7, the rook just attacks the queen immediately? Again, you just play queen e4. And now after rook a to d8, it looks like black has just finished their development. And also there's a threat of moving this bishop. The thing is, position is still evaluated +3 after bishop to d4, attacking the queen, because the king is just unsafe. The black king is just unsafe. The queen moving away to f5 means you can just play pawn to f5. This is game over now. The rook is, attacking the pinned piece. The pawn cannot push. It's attacked multiple times. If after bishop d4 the queen takes this, then you have a sacrifice. Rook e6. Boom. How about that? And now we're winning material. So the king takes back. Let's see what's happening now. Queen h3 is the killer move. Queen f5 cannot be played to block because after rook checks, you also have bishop checks idea. As soon as the king is removed from the defense of this queen, then you can win a free queen. So that move cannot happen. If the king goes to f7, then rook f1 pins the queen to the king. So king can go to d7. The only move will be the king to e7, but then rook e1 check. And then the king will have to go on the f file, and we can then play rook f1. So in this position, after bishop to d2, let's look at this move. Knight to e7. Instead of king e7, stupid hunt. Doesn't really work, as you see, because of the many weaknesses on the black territory. White now plays knight to e5. So this move... And now let's pay attention. A move like c5, just to make an example. Right, knight e7 is made. And also there's an attack on the queen. So our opponent will have to respond to that threat. Okay, rook 8 d8. Stops that knight from this very strong idea. Okay, f3. Now look carefully. If black plays c5 now, the idea of taking this pawn, the usual Rubinstein move. Okay, knight to g4 comes now. And this move wins on the spot. The queen is trapped. Well, okay, the queen can go to g5 actually. I mean h4. But then you play queen h8, check. Only move is knight to g8. And now bishop h7. Capitalizes on the pinned knight. We're going to take the knight. It's game over. The king can't just escape by going to e7, now allowing the rook to defend the knight. Because queen to g7 check is threatening rook e6 check. Very strong threat. This rook is deadly. It's got a deadly attack, and if the king takes, obviously, this is going to be game over very soon when the other rook comes into the game. And the funny thing is, this is happening no matter what. Let's make an example. Knight to f6 seems like a normal move now for black. But either way, you're going to play rook takes here. Check. The pawn can't take, it's pinned. And by the way, the king can't just move away and say, look, you know what, take that pawn, I don't want to get the king to go on being hunted. So let's just swap, maybe you take an extra pawn, whatever. The problem is now you make knight f6 check, and that wins more material, much more material. Our opponent doesn't have anything. So let's make an example. Check. Remember, our opponent now has this move, queen to h2, which is really dangerous. The king cannot take the rook because rook now check. This is too strong. The king doesn't move anywhere, and that's gonna be, the king is completely trapped in that case. If instead our opponent doesn't take the rook, but rather in this, after the knight f6 check, the king moves, then queen f7 check is the way to go. It's the best move you can possibly make. You gotta be careful that this queen and this bishop don't have the cooperation on h2 and then queen h1 win this rook. It's dangerous. So in this position, after rook e6 check, you might ask, okay, what if black just takes the rook instead of running away? So, take the rook. Let's see if you can mate me. Okay, bishop f5 is the next move. Boom. Doesn't get any crazier than this. Because now our opponent will have to go back to e7. He got attack on this light square, and then a rook going to e1 is deadly. And our opponent is forced to give us the queen. And then we're, finishing this game with the winning advantage. If instead our opponent also takes the bishop, then knight h6 check. The king is left with the only choice of going to e6, but that's mate. So that means that the black player's only choice was actually to give up the queen for the knight. Let's do the very last recap. This is important because now we're going to see the other move, another move that usually they will play in such a case. So knight f6 early take, queen takes, knight f3, and now the best move h6. Okay, bishop d3, and we're looking at bishop d6. Okay, c3. Okay, castle, castle. So let's look at knight c6. And we looked at this before. So we play bishop c2, b6 to develop, rook e1, bishop b7, queen to d3, rook f to e8, check. King moves, bishop to d2, knight to e7, knight to e5. Okay, we got it before. What if black... Okay, after rook a to d8, stopping this this move, white plays f3, white is completely winning. What if black takes this knight? This knight is a super strong knight, so we take. Okay, pawn takes back, and now only move would be queen to h4, the only move that makes sense. Queen h8 check, only move knight g8, bishop e3, allowing the rooks to join the game. Okay, f5 by white. Okay, take en passant, queen takes in f6. What's happening here? Bishop to d4. So bishop e3 has this idea of playing bishop to d4. e5, stopping the, attacking the bishop. Bishop b3, threatening to go to, f7, g8. Bishop to d5, blocking that. These are all best moves, but they're all pointless. f4 now, crazy enough. The pawn can't take the pawn because bishop takes the queen. And the pawn can't take our bishop because after all the trades, and you take this, you take the rook, the king takes back, you take this bishop, then you can take this knight here, it's game over. So let's look at this move. Bishop takes bishop, the strongest piece we have here, attacking this square. Okay, here we ignore it and we just play this move. Right? And now the queen can't stay on that file because rook f1 will win the game. Queen e6, saving. Okay, but still, rook f1, check. King e7, queen check now in g7. There is no coming back. The king can't move anywhere. Queen f7 is the only move. Rook check is the most accurate way to continue. The bishop will take back. And now rook f1 exploiting the pin. Rook f8. These are all forced moves, if you notice. What to do now? Rook to e1. The idea is very simple. Simply push this pawn and then capture more material. We're winning this endgame. If black plays king to e8, trying to preserve material. This doesn't work because, okay, e6 comes anyway. The bishop can't just say he's going to play bishop takes the pawn, but then, what if black plays bishop h5? Does that save the game? Okay, no, because e7. What a joke. Attacking these two rooks, they're so powerless. The knight take back doesn't work because you got checkmate. So going back to this position, straight after we both players castled, we mentioned knight c6. What happens if c5 now? This is important. It's one of the main moves. In this case, we take the pawn because we don't... I mean, bishop e3 is one of the thematic moves in that position. We take the pawn because after bishop takes back, queen to e2, and now knight to c6 develop, bishop to c2. It's kind of similar to before, except the d file is empty. But the point is this. Let's say now that there's a bishop in b6, you can win. I mean, c5. Look, let me show you. Play b6 for development of the bishop. This square is really silly. b6, you play b4. So you win a tempo. The bishop goes to d6, you play queen e4, attacking the knight, and the checkmate threat. So that's just like, you know, a line that I've encountered myself. I thought it was good to show here for better memorization and understanding of all the weaknesses that tend to arise in black territory when they play Rubinstein. Let's look instead at this move. Rook to d8 instead of b6. Rook to d8. More natural move. g4. Just, this is so crazy. But like, it makes perfect sense when you think about it. You want to play g5. You don't care about your king because you can play king h1, rook g1. Our opponent pieces are not well placed enough to start an attack. Queen to e7. These are all best moves according to the engine. g5. h5. Keeping the file closed, obviously, because then it gets easier and easier. b4. Attacking the bishop. Bishop to b6. g6. Creating damage around the opponent king side. Okay, what if pawn takes? Black says, you know what? Show me what you got, you know, take... Okay, well, b5 attacks the knight. The knight will have nowhere really to go except knight to a5. Bishop to g5 now is a skewer. We're going to leave the line there. There's too many things that can happen. But this is a completely winning position for us. Look at the pawn structure of our opponent. Look at the way the pieces are placed and look at our pieces. Besides, I think you've seen enough. This video is quite long. You know exactly how to deal against the Rubinstein. I'll see you next time.